Hey all, quick question. How did a group that policed the hunt become the backbone of resistance? The answer lives in the Cheyenne warrior societies. 17 September 1868 at Arikari Fork, Colorado Territory. A low island in a shallow river and a ring of riders testing rifle fire from the far bank. Across the 19th century, Central Plains from the Platte and Republican to the Arkansas and Washita, the Cheyenne organized public order and warfare through paired institutions, the Council of 44 for civil authority, and the military societies that enforced rules in camp and led war parties. Among these societies, three stand out in both memory and record: the Dog Soldiers, the Kit Fox, and the Bowstrings. Their headmen decided when a village moved how hunts were policed, who formed the rear guard at a ford, and when a charge began or ended. Allied and rival actors framed their story: Arapaho and Lakota camps that often joined them, traders and settlers pushing trails, and United States Army columns patrolling posts and winter routes. The central question for this episode is direct. How did the Dog Soldiers, the Kit Fox, and the Bowstrings convert social discipline into battlefield power between the 1830s and the 1870s? And why did that system shape the outcome of fights from Platte Bridge and Beecher Island to Washita and Summit Springs? The answer matters because these societies were not ad hoc war clubs. They were standing bodies with rules, songs, and duty bundles that linked council decisions to action on the ground, so that what happened inside the camp circle determined what happened under fire. Establishing the time, place, and actors lets us test that linkage in specific fields and dates and measure how a way of keeping order became a way of making war. Spring 1830s to 1849, Upper Arkansas and South Platte. Trade posts concentrate along the Santa Fe and Platte corridors, while camp circles range between Republican River and Powder River. Military societies already police hunts and regulate movement. Deep cause one forms here, authority and war leadership are fused inside the societies. So any shock to land use or travel routes becomes a test of internal order. In 1849, a sweeping cholera epidemic kills leaders and kin across Cheyenne bands. Survivors reorganize around hard service. The Dog Soldier cadre grows, drawing men from fractured lineages and anchoring along the Smoky Hill and Republican country. Objective for Cheyenne leadership: keep herds and families mobile, preserve hunting loops, and deter armed intrusions. Constraint: disease loss, rising migrant traffic, and dependence on trade powder and lead. 1851, Fort Laramie Treaty season on the Platte. United States commissioners fix broad hunting territories and pledge annuities while emigrant roads stay open. For Cheyenne, the treaty promises recognition of range and a mechanism to seek redress. For the United States Army, the priority is safe passage on roads with minimal garrison costs. Logistics snapshot: small posts spaced along trails supply by wagon from Missouri and limited winter reach. Immediate pressure grows anyway: traffic surges and hunters crowd buffalo edges. 1859, gold in the Pikes Peak country. Camps south of the South Platte feel the crush of new towns and roads. 1861, Fort Wise Treaty on the Arkansas reduces the earlier land guarantee to a compact reservation. Many Southern Cheyenne headmen sign under duress or in hope of protecting civilians. Dog Soldier and allied militants reject it. The split is now formal agency bands tied to annuity points versus roaming societies that insist on free movement. United States objective: concentrate Cheyenne near agencies to cut raiding and secure mining routes. Constraint: few regular troops and scattered posts. Cheyenne objective: avoid confinement that breaks the hunt and cedes river timber. Constraint: ammunition and horse fodder in dry seasons. Winter 1863 to autumn 1864, escalating raids, reprisals, and irregular militia action culminate at Sand Creek on 29 November 1864. After the massacre, surviving families consolidate behind society headmen who argue that only mobility and strict internal discipline can keep camps alive. Proximate cause chain is complete: a treaty that shrank land settlers and militia, pushing into river bottoms, and a massacre that convinces militants that agency dependence is fatal. 1865. Powder River and Platte districts burn with running fights. Forts along the Smoky Hill and Republican extend pickets to shield stage lines. Logistics snapshot for United States columns: wagon trains, vulnerable to fire and water, scarcity, reliance on scouts for pursuit, and limited ability to close with mounted warriors in open country. Logistics snapshot for Cheyenne societies: horse herds, as maneuver capital, light camp loads, dispersed scouts and ammunition from trade or capture that must be rationed. 1867. A policy pivot. The Indian Peace Commission seeks treaty settlements. At Medicine Lodge, the Southern Cheyenne and Southern Arapaho accept reservation terms on the Canadian and Washita with promises of rations and schools. The aim from Washington is cost control and pacification by interior agencies rather than constant War Department campaigning. Constraint agency corruption slow deliveries and ration shortfalls that turn winter into crisis. The Kansas Pacific Railroad pushes west at the same time. Protecting the grade in new towns becomes a standing Army task with patrols from Fort Hays, Fort Wallace, and Fort Dodge. 1868. Fort Laramie Treaty with the Lakota Framework is extended to bands in the north, shaping the northern Cheyenne environment around Powder River. But on the Central Plains, a different rhythm takes hold. General Philip Sheridan directs winter strikes to break village cohesion and horse strength. Orders flow for converging columns that find and hit lodges at dawn. Cheyenne society objectives in response hold non-combatants together, screen crossings and trade space for time until spring grass restores horsepower. Constraints tighten foals are fragile powder is finite, and repeating rifles in small United States detachments change the cost of close assault. September 1868, Beecher Island. Dog soldier leaders mass against Forsyth scouts on the Arakarai, testing the strength of the new repeating fire. Losses among prominent warriors and mounts underscore a logistical truth: massed mounted charges cannot absorb concentrated fire without cover. November 1868, Washita. United States winter campaign hits villages along the river. Societies try to form rear guards and corridors for flight. Immediate triggers in agency districts that winter include arrests of suspected raiders, efforts to disarm visiting warriors, and ration stress as herds thin and delivery schedules slip. 1869, Summit Springs. A converging pursuit overran a dog soldier village, destroying concentrated stock and further scattering families. After this, society leaders operate in smaller packets or fold into broader councils. Administrative frame shifts again that year and the next. The grant peace policy moves many agencies under interior with church appointees. In 1871, Congress ends formal treaty making and substitutes agreements and executive orders. For Cheyenne, this means fewer diplomatic levers and deeper dependency on agency logistics they do not control. For the Army, it means continued responsibility to protect railroads, homesteads, and mail lines while striking winter camps to force compliance. Early 1870s buffalo slaughter accelerates on southern plains, removing the economic base that allowed societies to finance war through the hunt. Homestead fencing and railroad towns press river timber. United States objectives, now fused with commercial aims, are to keep rails open, settle land, and confine roaming bands near agencies. Cheyenne objectives narrow to survival: preserve horses, shield children and elders, and retain enough freedom of movement to avoid starvation. The stage is set for the late-decade fights in the north, where the same society logic police the camp, lead the rear guard, husband ammunition, and mounts will decide who lives through the next winter. July 26, 1865, Platte Bridge Station, North Platte River. Midsummer heat rises from the sage while the river runs high with snowmelt. Mixed Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Lakota parties ride the bluffs east of the post, testing the mounted patrols that ferry dispatches over the bridge. Inside the palisade, a small garrison from frontier cavalry regiments rotates picket duty and keeps the telegraph clicking toward Fort Laramie. The signal wire shortens reaction time but cannot conjure fresh mounts or cartridges. When a relief detachment moves to cover a wood train on the north bank, the riders close from broken ground and cut the file in two. Lieutenant Casper Collins is killed on the approach. Society men in painted shirts direct the press and manage the withdrawal when volleys thicken near the bridgehead. The immediate effect is local but sharp. Freight is delayed upriver. Couriers carry loss lists south to the district commander. Civilians on the Platte Road cluster tighter around posts and stage stations. For Cheyenne camps, the lesson is reinforced in council that night. Against dispersed patrols, disciplined pushes can bite. Against a post with cover and ammunition, one strike is enough. After sundown, the riders recoil to river timber, and the camp circle moves before dawn to avoid a counterprobe. No treaty term has shifted, but the calculus has. The wire can sprint news, not men. September 17th to 19, 1868. Arakarai Fork of the Republican Beecher Island ground. Low autumn water reveals gravel bars and a spindle of willows. Roman Nose and other dog soldier headmen draw fighters from southern Cheyenne villages and allied bands to meet a small party of civilian scouts under George A. Forsyth. The scouts dig rifle pits into the island and stack carcasses as breastworks. A thin wind rifles the grass and carries powder smoke downriver. The first day sees classic mounted circles probing for gaps. When repeating fire answers faster than the horses can close, society leaders shift to dismounted pushes from the cutbanks. Messages ride both ways through empty country. From the island, 2 volunteers slip at night to carry word to Fort Wallace. The post ride's hard to muster relief, but the route is dry and broken. From Cheyenne lines, runners pass through the coulees to report losses and ask for more powder and lead. The village women watch the ponies and refill water bags. In council, headmen argue over whether to burn the island with driftwood or continue the firing pressures until the scouts are out of cartridges. The second day takes Roman nose when he leads a close pass. The third day brings the same stutter of shots and a slower beat of hoofs as mounts founder. The island holds because the repeating rifles collapse charges in the open and the scouts conserve ammunition under strict fire discipline. When relief finally approaches from Fort Wallace after several days, the warriors are already drawing off with their wounded. Immediate effects ripple far beyond the Arikari. Cheyenne families mourn named men whose medicine anchored the dog soldier line. Southern camps weigh the risk of massed mounted charges against small dug in detachments with repeating guns. United States commanders measure the cost of sending small parties deep without guaranteed relief and reinforce the habit of telegraphing posts to call for converging columns rather than a single sprint to contact. Georgia Forsyth after action report. Fort Wallace, 30 September 1868. We entrenched upon the island with knives and tin cups. The enemy charged repeatedly sometimes within a few yards, but the fire of our repeating arms delivered coolly checked them. Our couriers went out in the night by crawling the shallows. Without relief, we could not have held another day. Late November 1868, Washita River, winter line near present day, Cheyenne country. Frost heaves along the bends and a light snow quiets the cottonwoods. General Philip Sheridan has ordered winter strikes to break the capacity of villages to mass in spring. The approach comes in a snowstorm through tangled bottoms. 7th Cavalry under George, a Custer finds a sleeping camp at first light on November 27th. The village belongs to Black Kettle, but the river miles hold other lodges up and downstream. Within heartbeats, society police turn from hunt law to rear guard law. Kit Fox headmen seize fast ponies for couriers. Bowstring men pull boys to the timber and push elders to the cutbanks. Dog soldier pickets throw themselves into the first line of fire to create a corridor north and west. The first shock is confusion as lodges burn and pony herds are driven off. The second shock is speed. Once the first volleys pass, the surviving groups splice into the timber, climb the river edges, and scatter along the snow-filled draws. Runners go upriver to warn other camps. A few hours decide the fates of encampments the scouts have not yet marked. Communications are primitive but effective. There is no wire in the bottoms, only human links and the discipline of knowing a direction and sticking to it when smoke rises behind you. United States couriers ride back toward Camp Supply through sleet to confirm success and count captured stock. Delays are baked into the route. Snow and swollen fords make a one-day message into two. In the interval society, men organize retrievals for hidden children and negotiate the approach to agency posts for food without surrendering weapons. Immediate effects are concrete. A pony herd is reduced by hundreds of mounts striking at the heart of mobility. Lodges and food stores go to ash. Families divide to avoid encirclement. In headquarters, tabulated returns mark hostile destroyed and plan a fresh sweep along the river. Each incident tightens the same two screws. First, logistics. On the Platte, the telegraph carries orders, but escorts cannot be everywhere at once. At the Arikari, repeating rifles make cavalry-style charges costly. At Washita, the seizure of horses and food cripples spring power before it can flower. Second command rhythm. Military societies translate council decisions into immediate motion. In each case, their job is not glory but order. At Platte Bridge, they decide the moment to disengage. At Beecher Island, they pivot from mounted to dismounted attack and regulate the retreat after key losses. At Washita, they enforce a triage delay with the ready move, the vulnerable scatter toward preselected crossings. Seasons and weather amplify every choice. Summer heat on the North Platte favors those with water sense and fresh mounts. Dry autumn at the Arikari makes the island tenable because the channel is fordable everywhere, but deep enough to slow a rush. Winter at Washita compresses time into minutes before tracks betray a route or a freezing child cannot be moved again. Signals and delays frame outcomes. Where a wire runs posts can mass, but only along roads and bridges. Where only couriers run the side that set routes and council before sunrise wins the hour that counts. Interpreters sit in the hinge. Agency talk with chiefs after Washita must pass through men who know both registers. Words like peace and surrender bend in translation to concrete exchanges of horses, rifles, rations, and hostages. Skirmishes rise from those edges. A failed handover or a seizure inside an agency square triggers a night ride, and the next morning a field report about missing animals or shots fired near a hay party. By early winter 1868, pressure is cumulative. The Beecher Island losses weaken the thin layer of elite fighters who customarily lead the first circle in a charge. The Washita strike tears open the material base of one village and frightens others upriver into movement that scatters supplies. In both arcs, the societies remain the working hinge between survival and collapse. Their capacity to hold order under stress is intact. Their ability to concentrate for a set peace fight is narrowing. That is the escalator toward the next summer, when converging columns will look for a village running out of horses on open ground, and the Dog Soldier Band will face its hardest decision. July 1868 to July 1869, Republican and South Platte country. The campaign that breaks the independent Dog Soldier Band is not a single charge, but a chain of directed marches, winter strikes, and a summer encirclement that lands at Summit Springs. Sheridan sets the frame in late 1868, authorizing converging columns to hit lodges in cold weather when grass is thin and foals are weak. His staff guidance fixes a rhythm that pairs scouting lines with pre-dawn attacks and emphasizes seizure of pony herds over set peace fights. For Cheyenne society, headmen, the counter is discipline in motion. Keep the camp column tight, push elders to cover, assign rear guards, and avoid being fixed against open water or bare ridges. November 27, 1868, Washita River Line, 7th Cavalry under George. A Custer strikes first light against Black Kettle's village. In the confusion, Kit Fox and Bowstring men act as police turned rear guard, opening corridors for non-combatants, while detachments cut loose pony herds. Casualty ranges and contemporary Army returns list dozens of Cheyenne killed and a similar number of captives. Cheyenne testimony emphasizes non-combatant deaths and the mixed presence of visiting families from several bands. Fact versus folklore dispute persists over the exact number of lodges destroyed and whether simultaneous strikes were ready upriver. What is not disputed is the campaign effect. Mounts are lost at a moment when winter fodder is scarce, and the village network is shocked into movement. Order extract: Philip H. Sheridan, Field Instruction, Department of the Missouri Winter, 1868. Strike the villages in winter. Take the horses first. The fight ends when they must go on foot. Winter 1868 to spring 1869, from the Canadian in Washita back toward the Republican. United States columns continue pressure with scouts probing river timber and patrols shadowing snow tracks until storms force the lines back to posts. The Dog Soldier Band, centered around Tall Bull and other headmen, regroups with allied families and shifts, camp north and west, aiming to keep distance from agency posts while avoiding the deep snows on the high divides. Logistics on both sides are tight. Cavalry must feed horses from distant depots and repair mounts after long sleet marches. Warriors must ration powder and ball and cull herds against shrinking grass. The societies enforce strict order. The duty band seizes horses to keep a reserve of fresh mounts, sets crossing rules at each creek, and appoints watchers to keep young men from breaking off into wasteful raids that would give away the line of march. June to early July 1869. The Republican River forks and the dry draws around Beaver Creek. Colonel Eugene A. Carr, with elements of 5th Cavalry and Pawnee Scouts under Frank North, rides a long arc out of the Platte posts, aiming to locate the Dog Soldier village. The order of battle is concise. United States side: several companies of 5th Cavalry, the Pawnee Battalion of Scouts, a train of pack mules for rations and ammunition. Cheyenne side: a Dog Soldier-led village with mixed families, fighting men organized by societies into quick reaction knots, and a mobile pony herd that is both lifeline and vulnerability. Terrain favors the hunter who moves first. Shortgrass prairie rolls into shallow ravines that hide movement until a column tops a rise. Water is patchy. A wrong turn feeds horses to dust. Carr keeps his line-light scouts wide and mules close. He is hunting a camp, not a skirmish line, and the rules of engagement are clear: close hard, scatter the herd, and press before the village can mount. July 11th, 1869, Summit Springs, Colorado Territory. Dawn breaks on a Dog Soldier village, tucked along a ravine with brush and low rises that give some cover on the first rush. Pawnee scouts lead Carr onto the approach flats. The cavalry forms in extended order to cut escape lines as they close. First contact is a charge through pony herds and between lodges, splitting the camp into pockets. Cheyenne fighters rally around the society, headmen, and hit the flanks to open corridors for families. Kit Fox and Bowstring men seize boys and old people, forcing them toward the brushy draws, while Dog Soldier knots countercharge to buy seconds. The fight compresses quickly to close range among lodges. Repeating carbines on the cavalry side push volume. Cheyenne fire comes in sharp bursts from cover, where men can make a stand. Within an hour, the village is overrun in segments. Tall Bull is killed in the action. Several other named headmen fall with him. Casualties reported in Army returns tally a few dozen Cheyenne killed on the field, and a number of prisoners, chiefly women and children. Cheyenne recollections give higher totals for the dead and emphasize the scramble of families to escape under fire. United States losses are low by comparison in most accounts, a function of surprise ground taken at a run and immediate seizure of mounts. After action extract, Eugene. A car report to department headquarters on the Platte mid-July 1869. The scouts made the discovery and led with great spirit. We charged at once, cutting the village in two and taking the pony herd. Resistance was brave and determined, but brief, the ground being much in our favor. The humanitarian outcome is stark. Non-combatants are captured in the first hour and assembled under guard. Some children separated in the rush are recovered later that day by scouts combing the draws. Lodges and food stores burn by order to prevent reuse. Pony herds are taken as prizes of war and redistributed to scouts and posts. On the Cheyenne side, the social fabric suffers a specific kind of damage. Society bundles are lost or scattered, headmen who carry songs and rules are dead, and the village's capacity to police itself on the move is abruptly reduced. For the Army, logistics stress eases in the short term, because captured stock helps remount cavalry. Yet supply lines remain long and exposed, and a rapid return to post is necessary to avoid counter raids once news spreads. The tactical sequence at Summit Springs shows why this becomes the decisive bend in the campaign. Carr's approach uses scouts to find cavalry to fix and carbine fire to break stands at lodges before the societies can set a coherent rear guard. The societies still fight to form lanes for escape in the job they have done at a dozen crossings, but the space is too tight, and the horse herd goes at the first shock. Once the herd is gone, the fight is really an evacuation under fire. In that posture, even the bravest dog soldier charge buys minutes, not victory. Fact versus folklore disputes persist around the detail of specific duels and gestures on the field, including embellished scenes of sash staking or lone last stands. The stable core is the operational picture of a village surprised, divided, and stripped of mobility. Across the same season, agency policy narrows diplomatic options. The grant peace policy places more authority with interior agents and church appointees and shifts the language of compliance from negotiated treaty to executive order and agreement. For Cheyenne bands that had used agency visits to trade time for rations and space, the change reduces leverage. Arrest orders tied to named incidents near stage lines and railroad grade camps trigger seizures at agency squares. When interpreters relay that rifles must be surrendered, society, men balk, concerned that disarmament collapses their ability to police their own camps on the road. Those flashpoints prompt night withdrawals from agency proximity, bringing families back into the moving column at the very moment when patrols are sweeping river corridors. Administrative pressure therefore aligns unintentionally with Carr's operational net. By late July 1869, the confrontation's result is plain. The independent dog soldier band as a concentrated field force is broken. Surviving fighters fold into other Cheyenne camps or move north toward Powder River country, where Northern Cheyenne society structures, including lines remembered as Crazy Dogs and Wolf Warriors, overlapping bowstring heritage, pick up the tasks of camp policing and rear guard work. In practical military terms, the United States gains two advantages. First, a reduction in the frequency and weight of coordinated mounted attacks along the Republican and Smoky Hill lines. Second, a permanent increase in the time it takes Cheyenne camps to remount in spring because the herds lost at Summit Springs take seasons to rebuild. For viewers following the order of battle logic, the numbers are a means to scale the outcome, not a banner to wave. Contemporary Army reports list Cheyenne dead at several dozen with low, single-digit United States losses. Later compilations give broader ranges and dispute whether certain named men fell at Summit Springs or in subsequent skirmishes during the pursuit. Mark those as contested. What remains uncontested is that the societies fought to execute their core function, hold order under shock, and that the loss of horses and headmen at Summit Springs could not be offset by courage alone. The legal and policy track continues after the shooting. Captives are processed through posts and agencies, sometimes paroled under conditions to return for rations, sometimes held for exchange. Inventories of seized property are drawn up for departmental files. The Army writes clean returns, and the department claims the field as proof that winter pressure plus fast summer reconnaissance has broken resistance. In Cheyenne camps, the assessment is colder. The names of the dead are counted. The missing children are sought through kin and friendly interpreters, and the remaining society headmen reassign duties for future marches. The fight is lost. The work of survival continues. Two short lines bracket the campaign's logic. Take the horses first and cut the village in two. Sheridan's winter instruction defines the policy. Carr's after-action line defines the field method. The dog soldiers Kit Fox and Bowstrings meet both with discipline, and that is why the fight lasts as long as it does, even when surprise and ground run against them. 11 July 1869, Summit Springs, Colorado Territory. Colonel Eugene A. Year leads companies of 5th Cavalry with Pawnee Scouts under Frank North onto a dog soldier village anchored by Tall Bull. The United States objective is explicit and narrow: destroy the village as a fighting base, seize the pony herd, and capture or disperse its families before the societies can form a rear guard. The Cheyenne objective is equally clear: keep non-combatants moving through the brushy draws. Hold enough horses to survive the next season, and deny the troopers a clean encirclement long enough to break contact. Constraints are hard on both sides. Cavalry mounts have come a long arc from Platte busts and must be kept in hand. Water is patchy. The day is hot, and a long pursuit after contact will burn out the weakest horses. Ammunition is adequate in the carbine pouches, but resupply depends on a mule train that cannot gallop. For the Cheyenne, powder and lead are finite, much of it bartered or captured. Some men carry only a handful of loads. Pony herds are the maneuver capital and the winter bank account, yet they will panic under fire and flow to the first open gap. The lodges hold food and clothing, and the society bundles that bind headmen to their duties. Lose those, and order itself is wounded. First contact decides the form of the day. Pawnee Scouts slip Carr onto the approach flats before dawn. The charge through the pony herd cuts the village into pockets and pushes firing lines into the alleys between lodges. Kit Fox and Bowstring men seize boys and elders and shove them into the brushy ravines, dog soldier knots countercharging to buy seconds. For perhaps an hour, it is close, loud work. Carbines firing in bursts at 40 or 50 yards, Cheyenne rifles answering from low cover with a steadier, slower beat. Then the herd is gone. With horses driven off and lodges burning, initiative shifts irrevocably. Tall Bull falls in the crush near a ravine. Other named headmen die trying to punch open a lane. Resistance does not end in a signal. It drains away as families in 2s and 3s ghost out along the folds of ground, and the troopers overrun what remains. Eugene, a Carr official report. On the Platte, July 1869. Their stand was brave and stubborn among the lodges and ravines. Only the loss of their horses and our rapid pressure broke them. The scouts deserve the credit for the discovery and the first dash. That is the turning point. Before the charge, the dog soldier band is a concentrated field force with a mobile base. After the charge, it is fragments folding into other camps or bending north toward Powder River country. The immediate effects are visible by sundown. Captives sit under guard. Charred lodge frames mark the center. Seized stock is tallied for redistribution to scouts and posts. In Cheyenne councils, the cost is measured in names and in the absence of the men who carried songs and rules. Without those voices, the work of keeping young men from breaking ranks on the march of holding a ford under pressure of rationing powder to rear guards becomes harder by the day. Two constraints stamped onto the field explain why the turn holds into the next season. The first is ammunition. Cavalry repeats fast from carbine tubes. Warriors husband scarce cartridges for chosen shots. The second is horses. Sheridan's winter guidance, take the horses first, proves operational truth. Once the herd runs, a counterstroke can buy minutes, but not a reversal. The surviving societies still do their job under shock order. The retreat cover the crossings carry children, but their ability to concentrate for a set-piece fight is gone. An evidence-based counterfactual sets the limits of what might have changed. Had Carr arrived 2 hours later and found the village already mounted and strung out on the move, the charge would have cut stragglers, not the herd, and the main body likely would have slipped across broken ground with lighter losses. Had the scouts missed a sign the previous day and the column searched blind for 24 hours, in July heat mounts would have blown, and any contact would have opened at longer range, with a higher chance the village escaped, with most stock. In either alternate line, the band survives as a coherent force into autumn, but only until the next winter pressure comes when grass is thin and foals are weak. The structural screws from earlier in the decade still turn. Human cost closes the ledger. Tall Bull's death is named in returns and recollections. Other headmen fall without full tally. Women and children are taken. Some are reunited in the days after the fight. As scouts sweep the draws, others only much later at posts and agencies. A winter count entry among northern Cheyenne later years reduces the thing to its cold poetry. The year the dog soldier village was surprised at Summit Springs, a mark with no adjectives, only a memory anchor for families who moved north and west after the smoke. Displacement paths trace from the ravine to agency squares, from posts back to camps, trying to hold enough horses for another crossing from the Republican country to Powder River, where the same society, logic police the camp, lead the rear guard stand until the last boy is clear, will be asked of new headmen. Fold the moment back into the deeper causes laid out earlier. Treaties that shrank land without protecting river timber forced camps to move more often with thinner buffers. Rail and road spines let small garrisons mass quickly, while the buffalo decline stripped the surplus that financed war through the hunt. Administrative shifts pushed compliance onto agency squares, where disarmament demands collided with the society's duty to keep order in their own circles. Against that frame, Summit Springs is less an isolated catastrophe than the field proof of a system under relentless external pressure. The dog soldiers, Kit Fox and Bowstrings, could still translate social law into battlefield steadiness. They could not conjure horses from ash or cartridges from empty pouches, and they could not negotiate a river of orders that carried the campaign from winter raids to a summer ravine. The turning is therefore precise. Who, Carr and North with 5th Cavalry and Pawnee Scouts against Tall Bull's Dog Soldier Village and allied families, where the shallow folds and brush of Summit Springs, when a July dawn that favors the rider who already holds the high ground. Objectives destroy or escape with the heart of a people's mobility. Constraints ammunition counted by handfuls, order by draws, orders that specify horses first, and a sky with no snow to hide the trail. Immediate effect initiative to the United States and the end of a concentrated band. A stand that becomes a withdrawal, captives ashes and a road bending north. The structural forces that made it likely treaties' rail policy and the accelerated loss of the buffalo remain in place after the smoke clears, ensuring that the next decision point will come, and it will come faster. Late July 1869 posts on the Platte in Arkansas write up clean returns, while families from the ravine at Summit Springs move in small knots toward agency squares or north toward Powder River. Law and administration move in parallel. Department reports fold the battle into a season of winter and summer pressure, and by autumn, captives have been processed at Camp Supply and Fort Hays and transferred to agencies under Interior. The annual report of the Commissioner of Indian Affairs for 1869 records the use of rations and conditional paroles to draw scattered Cheyenne back toward Darlington Agency on the North Canadian, with warnings that disarmament would be required and that any renewed raiding would bring military pursuit. In the same file run general orders from the Department of the Missouri repeat the winter rule that pony herds are contraband of war and may be redistributed to scouts and remount depots. Reservation boundaries and administrative language harden over the next 2 years. In 1871, Congress ends treaty making by statute and substitutes agreements and executive orders. Agency letters from Darlington and Fort Larned that winter show how this change narrows bargaining space to ration schedules, school rules, and travel passes. The 1868 Medicine Lodge framework still defines where the Southern Cheyenne are supposed to remain, but every enforcement beat now runs through Interior agents empowered to suspend annuities for absence without leave. The report of the Indian Peace Commission of 1868 is still cited to justify the geographic plan, even as agency memoranda in 1870 and 1871 concede that scattered families will keep to seasonal loops for grass-cut timber and to visit kin among northern camps. Land and resource pressures follow the paper. Survey notes and railroad progress reports from 1869 to 1870 show Kansas Pacific spurs and stage roads extending along the Smoky Hill and Republican with stock leases sprouting on river meadows the villages once favored for winter wood. After 1874, federal grazing contracts and mail route bids appear in the same counties where dog soldier camps had moved a few seasons earlier. By 1892, the agreement with the Cheyenne and Arapaho, negotiated by the Jerome Commission, cedes most of the remaining reservation in Indian Territory. Allotment rolls and patent books from the early 1890s list individual parcels where a contiguous reserve once lay. In the North, executive orders in 1884 and 1886 set the Northern Cheyenne Reservation on the Tongue River. Survey plats and timber sale permits from the next decade show how land policy there shifts from survival rations to managing a forested homeland. Demography makes the pressure visible. Agency census schedules at Darlington and Tongue River in the 1870s and 1880s count fewer lodges and more single-family entries, a bureaucratic way of marking the breakup of big camp circles. Mortality spikes appear in the ledgers where measles and whooping cough ran through groups held near agencies. The 1880s returns in multiple agencies show births recovering slowly, while deaths remain high in bad winters. War Department sanitary reports written during the Fort Robinson crisis of winter 1878 to 1879, when Northern Cheyenne, under leaders later remembered as Dull Knife and Little Wolf, left Indian Territory for the North record exhaustion exposure and gunshot wounds among prisoners and escapees. The executive documents of the House printed in 1879 fold those names into casualty tables. By 1890, the federal census reports the Northern Cheyenne population in the low thousands, and the Southern Cheyenne counted with the Arapaho in Indian Territory, a downscaled people, rebuilding in divided geographies. Cultural continuance threads the gap between paper and ground. The 1883 Federal Code of Indian Offenses bans major ceremonies, and Darlington Agency reports from the mid-1880s note prosecutions for dances. Yet, missionary letters also admit that Cheyenne leaders kept core obligations by shifting timing and place conducting ceremonies at distance from agency eyes or reframing them as harvest dances. School records from Carlisle and Hampton list Cheyenne boys and girls sent east in the 1880s and 1890s, with return reports remarking on English literacy alongside losses in fluency for Cheyenne language. At the same time, day school registers at agency note elders who quietly kept language in evening circles. The annual report of the Commissioner of Indian Affairs for 1890 includes a paragraph on the Native American Church's expansion. By the early 20th century, Cheyenne adoption of the Peyote Road provides a sanctioned frame for prayer that survives policy cycles. In ledger art catalogs compiled by the Smithsonian and the Bureau of American Ethnology, Southern Cheyenne artists such as Howling Wolf record mounted charges and camp police scenes from the 1860s in colored pencil on lined paper, seized or gifted during confinement. Those images created in the 1870s function as both memory and instruction for a generation raised under ration schedules. Memory tools inside the communities are just as concrete. Winter counts kept by Cheyenne families and their allies mark the year the Dog Soldier village was surprised at Summit Springs with a small sign burning lodges near a ravine Riders Without Horses set among other marks for the Arikari fight and the Washita winter. Agency clerks rarely valued such records. Yet, a 1905 ethnographer's notebook at the Tongue River Agency transcribes elders' glosses for several year signs, linking them to food shortage winters and the first years of school placements. Local commemorations grow. As the 20th century lengthens, the Beecher Island Memorial Association mounts annual events on the Arikari. Washita Battlefield becomes a National Historic Site with an administrative history that quotes both 7th Cavalry and Cheyenne accounts. County museums near Summit Springs collect family stories about the charge and the captives, even as Cheyenne storytellers frame the same event through the loss of horses and the duty of rear guards. On the legal side, the middle and late 20th century changes the policy air. The Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 ends allotment and supports constitutional governments. The Northern Cheyenne adopt a constitution in the mid-century and expand land holdings through purchase and federal trust transfers recorded in Bureau of Indian Affairs land titles. The American Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1978 and the Nainai Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act generate file trails of consultations and returns. Museum correspondence with the Northern Cheyenne tribe and with the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes documents repatriations of remains and sacred objects, including society items removed in the 19th century. Court dockets in the late 20th and early 21st centuries show water rights negotiations on the Tongue River and settlement agreements that confirm priority uses for the tribe. In Oklahoma, compact files record modern revenue and social service funding streams that underwrite cultural programs. Present day, continuance is explicit and named. The autonym, Tisist Sistis, appears in tribal education materials and language curricula. The Northern Cheyenne tribe, headquartered at Lame Deer, Montana, runs language immersion classrooms and publishes orthography guides with school board minutes and grant reports listing enrollment and lesson hours. The Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, headquartered at Concho, Oklahoma, operate a language and culture program with recorded classes, a youth drum group, and society history workshops. Tribal newsletters and program budgets lay out schedules for dances, storytelling series, and regalia repair days. On both reservations, seasonal movements remain now bound to wage work-school calendars and ceremonial cycles that survive the old 1880s bans. Health Department fact sheets show gains in vaccination and maternal care over the last 2 decades, but also track diabetes and substance use burdens, the long tail of ration years, and economic displacement. Census briefs in 2000, 2010, and 20 count Cheyenne citizens at home, and off-reservation and planning documents tie those numbers to housing grazing permits and timber plans. 5 records in prose bring the trail into focus. The report of the Indian Peace Commission of 1868 sets the original reservation plan. The annual report of the Commissioner of Indian Affairs for 1869 records post-Washita and Summit Springs policy, including conditional paroles and ration leverage. Carr's July 1869 report to the Department of the Platte states plainly that the village was cut in two and the horses taken a field predicate for every later administrative line. The 1871 statute-ending treaty making shifts diplomacy into agreements and orders, a change visible in agency letters that winter. The 1892 agreement with the Cheyenne and Arapaho codifies allotment and cession in Indian territory. Its roles and patents mark the new land map. Add 2 more that close the legal arc. The 1934 Indian Reorganization Act minutes, establishing modern Northern Cheyenne government and repatriation correspondence under the 90 Native American, Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, returning society items to tribal care. After Summit Springs, the people adapt, not erase. Law narrows movement, but families stitch routes that keep kin near rivers and schools and dance grounds. Land shrinks into parcels, but councils acquire backtracks and set grazing in tribal hands. Demography climbs from deep valleys marked in agency ledgers. Language and ceremony recenter in classrooms and chapter houses where duty bundles once lay. And each summer and winter on both reservations and in diaspora towns, commemorations speak names from the 1860s and 1870s, tying a battle in a brushy ravine to the present tense of Sista's life. Across the long arc from the 1830s to the late 1870s, 3 conclusions hold firm. First, Cheyenne military societies were standing institutions of governance as much as war, making the dog soldiers, kit fox, and bowstrings translated council decisions into movement schedules, hunt law, rear guards, and battle discipline. Second, the dog soldier rise after the 1849 mortality shock concentrated aggressive leadership between northern and southern divisions, giving the Cheyenne an operational instrument that could mobilize quickly punish disorder and stiffen lines at fords and village margins. Third, defeats at Beecher Island, Washita, and Summit Springs did not erase the system, so much as force it to adapt society. Duties persisted in northern and southern Cheyenne life, often quieter, sometimes renamed through the reservation transition policing camps, organizing travel and anchoring ceremonial continuities. Contested points revolve around numbers and weight of individuals. Casualty ranges at Beecher Island and Summit Springs differ by source. Army returns report lower totals than later tribal recollections. Roman Nose's precise influence on day-to-day tactical decisions at the Arikare and Tall Bull's last maneuvers at Summit Springs are retold with variations, some sharpening personal valor, others emphasizing collective action by society headmen. The scale of Washita's non-combatant deaths remains debated in method as well as count because village composition that dawn included visitors from multiple bands. On larger impact, one camp of historians stresses that frontier outcomes were driven primarily by logistics, rail rifles, and remounts, while another insists that without society discipline there would have been no sustained resistance at all. Both views read the same record from different angles of necessity. The durable legacy is institutional and symbolic. Institutionally, the societies demonstrated a doctrine that linked internal order to battlefield steadiness, regulate the camp, and you buy time under fire. That logic persists in how communities organized travel, rationed ammunition, and assigned rear guards through the last campaigns and into reservation life. It also seeds later governance councils relying on named duty bearers' rules, enforced for the group's survival, and ceremonies that bind obligation to action. Symbolically, the dog soldier and kit fox names became emblems of standing one's ground so others can live a meaning carried in winter. Counts ledger drawings of camp police and charges, and in today's commemorations at Arikare, Washita, and Summit Springs. For military history, the record leaves a procedural lesson initiative on the plains hinged less on single duels than on who controlled horses crossings and panic, raid back against the causes. The society system looks less like an anachronism than a rational adaptation to railheads, agencies, and winter war, a social machine built to turn discipline into time. That is why the story endures, because a people facing shrinking land and accelerating pressure used institutions of law and ceremony to hold order under shock, and their names still mark the places where that order did not break first. From context to legacy, the pattern is clear. Order in camp, time under fire. What surprised you most today? Numbers, terrain, or command decisions? Share in the comments. Thanks for watching.